It's one of those confrontations everyone whispers about. The gentle, hyper-feeling artist versus a world that seems to keep scrolling. Imagine this. An artist posts an honest, raw piece, a poem, a painting, a spoken word about grief. It's earnest, it's specific, it's vulnerable. Two things happen. A few people stop and feel something. They message, they cry, they thank the artist, but most people scroll on. They leave a polite emoji. They move to a different feed where things are fast, shiny, and uncomplicated. The artist feels exposed. That exposure becomes anger, confusion, maybe despair. Why doesn't everyone feel this? They ask. That question. Why doesn't everyone feel this? Is the starting point of today's video, are artists too sensitive? Or is the world numbed? Spoiler. The answer is both and neither. It's complicated, and that's why it's interesting. First, let's define the two poles so we don't talk past each other. When I say artists are sensitive, I don't mean weak. I mean a cluster of traits that many creative people share. Stronger emotional reactivity, heightened observation, deeper pattern recognition, and a readiness to feel ambiguous, contradictory things at once. Psychologists sometimes call parts of this sensory processing sensitivity, or link it to high openness to experience, a big five personality trait associated with imagination, aesthetic appreciation, and emotional depth. When I say the world is numb, I don't mean every human is emotionally dead. I mean modern environments, social media, mass entertainment, attention economies, transactional workplaces often reward fast emotions, loud signals, and simplified narratives. In other words, a lot of public culture has been designed for speed and low friction, not for nuance or slow, awkward feeling. So, sensitivity is a human trait. Numbness is often cultural and structural. There's research and plenty of clinical observation that creatives tend to score higher on measures like openness to experience and, in some cases, on traits like emotional reactivity. Two useful ideas. Sensory processing sensitivity, SPS. This is a temperament described by psychologist Elaine Aron. People high in SPS notice subtleties in the environment, have deep inner lives, and react strongly to stimuli, both positive and negative. That heightened noticing is a creative superpower. Subtlety is the fertilizer of art. The orchid hypothesis. Some researchers have suggested that certain people are like orchids. They need the right environment to flourish, but are sensitive to adversity. Others are like dandelions, resilient, can grow anywhere. Many artists look orchid-like, beautiful and fragile and capable of thriving in the right conditions. Put another way, artists aren't too sensitive as a moral failing. They're wired to notice and interpret more of the world's textures. That gives them gifts and vulnerabilities. Now to the other side. The modern world has structural features that can blunt feeling. Attention scarcity. Everything competes for microseconds. Platforms reward shock, novelty, and shareability. Subtlety loses. Emotional commodification. Emotions are turned into content units. Viral anger, clickable sadness, soundbite joy. That flattens the range of what gets amplified. Efficiency culture. At work, in school, in social norms, efficiency and predictability are prized. People trained to optimize often avoid messy feelings because they're inefficient. Collective numbing from overload. When you're exposed to trauma, spectacle, and crisis constantly, your nervous system can adapt by dulling the response. A safety mechanism that looks like indifference. So the culture tilts toward blunt, fast, and easily categorizable emotions, and away from the slow, ambiguous, uncomfortable feelings artists often make. Sometimes artists are called too sensitive because the label gets weaponized. Some artists lean into high drama as a social strategy. Sensitivity turns into performative suffering. Look how deep I am. That can breed resentment. Art is public work and must tolerate failure and feedback. When a creator takes every critique as a personal attack, it can make collaborators and audiences back off. That doesn't mean the artist is wrong, but the inability to process criticism constructively can limit growth. Sensitivity without boundaries becomes overwhelm. Some artists burn out because they treat every comment like a validation test. That's not necessarily noble. So yes, there are real costs when emotional sensitivity isn't paired with emotional regulation, craft, and community. Money changes everything. For many artists, the pressure to monetize work forces them into simplified expressions that sell well. For the audience, the subscription model and streaming algorithms decide what gets seen. That dynamic pushes art toward formats that track well with monetization metrics, and away from the awkward, slow, or small. Cultural economist example. Consider the indie musician who must choose between writing a 4-minute single that algorithms will favor, or a 20-minute experimental suite that might mean losing apartment rent. Economic pressure can make artists compress complexity, and that can look like softening their sensitivity because survival requires it. I want to push back on blanket statements. The world is numb is exaggerated. Lots of people are moved by art every day. The question is distribution. Who has time and resources to sit with a piece of art? A single person who works 2 jobs, raises kids, and scrolls on public transport doesn't have the same bandwidth for a 40-minute conceptual performance as a university art student. So it's not that people don't feel, often they can't afford to feel. This is a class issue, a time availability issue, and a design problem in attention architecture. Designing culture for constant stimulation deprives large slices of the population of the emotional bandwidth to engage with difficult art. Here's a hopeful framing. The healthiest artists are both sensitive and resilient. Sensitivity gives material. Resilience keeps the practice sustainable. Resilience does not mean stoicism or hardening. It means skillful responses, learning to process critique, setting boundaries, creating income diversity, and building communities that can absorb and reflect emotional labor. So the ideal isn't to stop feeling, it's to feel and to learn to carry feeling. So what's the verdict? Are artists too sensitive, or is the world numb? Both. Artists are often wired to feel more deeply, which makes them vulnerable in a culture that increasingly favors speed and simplification. But the problem is not individual sensitivity alone. It's the mismatch between human emotional systems and modern cultural architectures. Blaming artists for being sensitive is a familiar reflex, but it's short-sighted. And saying the world is wholly numb ignores the pockets of attention, care, and deep feeling that still exist. What matters is repair. Repair the economic structures, build slow cultural spaces, teach emotional literacy, and create support systems so that sensitivity becomes a sustainable force, not a sacrificial one. If you're an artist, protect your practice. Learn to translate, set boundaries, and build rituals that keep you working long term. If you're a viewer, practice attention. Support the small things. Your $5, your 30 minutes, your willingness to feel. All of it matters. If you run a platform, institution, or policy body, consider how design and incentives shape what gets felt and what gets ignored. You have the power to make space for depth. Art is a conversation between the world and the people brave enough to feel it. If that conversation sometimes feels one-sided, that's not a moral failing. It's a call to reformat how we live and listen.